Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're going to finally do the build that was promised for our kind of £600 Intel build. Now if you haven't seen it already, I would strongly suggest you watch two videos, one of which was the PC part picker list, which we'll link in the video description, which shows where we get the parts from and all the prices and break it all down. And also there is a kind of follow-up to that as well, and somewhat of a prequel to this, which is actually how to set up your motherboard test bed. So this is actually really important before you actually start assembling your build for the final time. It's always worth getting your motherboard, testing some of the components on it, just to make sure that it posts, gets a BIOS screen, and all those kinds of things. That's a really good thing to do. And if you're a novice or even experienced, it's always worth doing that sort of thing. It will take you a little bit more time, but I think it's actually beneficial, especially with these modern motherboards and processors these days where you never know if a thing's going to boot up or not. So if you've got it all built up into your case and you've got all your water cooling installed and you've done your cable management and then you find out something doesn't work, it's a real pain to have to undo all that work. So doing a little test bench, first of all, is really beneficial. So for those of you that haven't seen either of those videos, let's quickly introduce the parts. There will be timestamps in this video, so if you want to skip past any part, feel free to do so. But ideally, if you can watch the whole thing, it's great for our stats. So let's start off with the processor to begin with. So this is using the Intel i5-12400F. Fantastic price at the moment, around about £100. Great value for money, very decent performance, especially if you're building to somewhat of a budget. The processor does come with its own integrated stock cooler, which you can get by with in a pinch if you're trying to save a few pennies. Although we're actually going to be using the Silentium Fortis 5 ARGB. I had this one here and I think it looks really nice. And it's one of the few cases that we're going to be using in this build where that cooler actually fits and looks quite good. So we will be using that. Of course, you don't have to. You can use any cooler you want to. Like I said, even the stock one. Motherboard wise, we've got the MSI B760-P WiFi DDR4. Obviously DDR4 is going to keep our costs down, and also this is a relatively inexpensive motherboard on the B760 chipset, again somewhere around the £100 mark. The board includes a lot of the nice features that you'd expect to see on slightly higher price boards such as Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.3, multiple M.2 slots, and actually quite a nice aesthetic. Graphics card, we've gone with the ASUS Radeon RX 6600. This I actually picked up from gpus.co.uk for about £150, which is a £50 saving over its normal retail price. They are starting to drop down very slightly. I think for 1080p gaming on a budget, this is a really good choice. RAM, we've got some Lexar Aries DDR4, really nice RAM. A little bit more pricey than you can pick up some of the Corsair LPX, but if you want that a little bit of RGB bling, then I think these are a really good choice. We've used them numerous times before. They've always worked in any motherboard I've put them into, first time, which is absolutely fantastic. When it comes to storage, we're going with the M.2 drive, PCI Express Gen 4 x 4, which is the most the motherboard can actually support, so that is great, and we should get some decent speeds through this. Now you can spend an absolute ton on your M.2 storage. If you want to get a more expensive branded drive, feel free to do so. This is the Fikwot FN950 drive, currently on Amazon.co.uk, under £40, which at the time M.2 prices are slightly increasing. It's not a good time for M.2 storage, so this was actually a really good bargain. Again, all the affiliated links will be in the video description. As you'd expect from affiliated links, we do get a very small commission if you make a purchase. It doesn't cost you anything else, but it really does go to help out the channel. Case-wise, we're going with the Montech Air 903 Max. Now, I've not actually built in this case before, but we did do a teardown and review of it very recently. And from what I can see and from the price, this looks like an absolutely cracking deal. We have 4 included fans, 3 of which are addressable RGB, and they're 140mm fans, so plenty of airflow. And best of all, it's at a really good price at around about £60 here in the UK for the black version. Alternatively, the white version can sometimes be picked up for the same price, but is generally slightly more expensive. Now, something that you guys are definitely not going to like, but I don't mind. This is absolutely fine. We're trying to get by on a relatively meager budget here. So when it comes to the power supply, we're going with something which some of you may not like. This is the CIT ATV 500 watt. This is a bronze rated power supply. At the moment, power supplies, much like M.2 drives, are getting more and more expensive. This is going to be absolutely fine. We're looking around about 350 watts of total system draw under load for this, so we're well above that. Obviously, if you want to put a more expensive or a more branded unit into your PC, you're more than welcome to do so, but like I keep on saying, we are trying to stick to somewhat of a budget. I've used an absolute ton of these, probably getting on for 10 of them, and I've never had a failure, although I will say one did come through with a kind of cut cable, which whether or not that was because it was a warehouse item, I'm not entirely sure, but in terms of actual failure rates, never had one of these fail yet. So there we go, there's the parts introduced. Let's get on and get the build done. Okay, so let's get on with the build. So we've got our motherboard. I've actually got the processor on already. This is from when we did our test build on this, so I just left it in place just to keep the pins safe. For installing the processor, it's really easy to do. Press down on this latch, pull it to the side and release, and then this flap is able to come up. You can put your processor onto the pin grid array there, no problems at all. So put that down, pull down the lever, give it a little wiggle if you want to, then all the way down and then across into the latch, and it should hold into place. Quite a lot of tension on there, so do bear that in mind. So that is the CPU installed. Again, that is our Intel 12400F. Next, we're going to do our M.2 drive. Now with the M.2 drive, you just remove these two screws off the motherboard, and one of them is longer than the other. So the one on the left, which is closest to you on screen, is slightly bigger, which you see the difference there in the two screws. So that one there stays on the left. Move this out of the way. I've already peeled off the strip off the back, the protective strip, so make sure you do that if you're going to be following along. Sorry for the noises there. So this is our drive, the Fikwot FN950. With these drives, to install them, it just goes into the port there. You'll find that the drive does kind of rise up on about 10-15 degree angle. Push the drive down, and there's a little bit of plastic there, which actually that's not gone all the way through, so let's move that up. Yeah, push that down and then push that across, and that little bit of plastic just holds the drive in place. To remove it, so you can see how that goes, hopefully, if I can get a camera angle on this. So as you undo that, the drive kind of springs back up or pings back up. So yeah, that's nice and easy to do. So we can put our M.2 shield back over the top. We've already removed the protective coating, as I said. With these, for the screws, if you're wondering, these use a Phillips PH1 type. Don't over tighten those, not really necessary. As long as it's on there, it's going to be absolutely fine. This one is a little bit more of a pain, trying to get it lined up. Nope, that's just to the side. So lift it up a little bit and move it across. Actually hard to line up. Actually, I can see it better on the camera. Yeah, that feels better. And there we go. There is our M.2 drive installed. Next, we can install our RAM. So let's move the board across a little bit just so you can see what's going on here. So we need to install this into slots 2 and 4, counting from the processor away. So that is slot 1, slot 2, slot 3, slot 4. So we're going to open up the jewels on the side for the slots we're going to use. And I'm going to start from the back because otherwise I'm going to block the view. And just make sure that you line up the notch on your RAM with the RAM slot, and then firm and equal pressure into place. You'll notice the latches have latched into position, so that's good. And then we can do slot number 2 to make our dual channel RAM, and there we go, there's the RAM installed. So that is pretty much it. Now we need to install the CPU cooler. So for this installation of the CPU cooler, we've got this back plate. So those rubber bits go on the back of the motherboard. No, it's that way around. So those holes there and those holes there, they should match up with what we've got there. So what we need to do is to attach some screws onto the other side to hold that in place. So we've got our screws in place, one's there, one's there. Just use those to hold it in place briefly. I'm using these, and this one's a little bit hidden behind the RAM there. And another one in this corner. So you can do these up finger tight. And then there is actually a little spanner which comes in the kit, so you can tighten them right down. Right, next we need to put on the top plate, which is this one here, and that just fits over onto these. So it takes a little bit of fiddling to get it to lock into position. I do think I actually mentioned this in the review that the top plate isn't the best. Let's try it around the other way, see if that's any better. It's got a bit of a tendency to not be entirely straight, which is a bit of a pain. But anyway, next we've got 4 screws to hold that in place, so I'll go ahead and install those. Next we can install some thermal compound. There we go. Don't worry too much about it being uneven, because the pressure of the CPU cooler on the top of it will squish all that out, and with heat cycles it will flatten out completely. So now to install the cooler, just match up the screw at the front there with that screw puller there, and the one on the back, match that with the one on the back, and you should notice the pipes are back swept towards the rear of the motherboard, which should be absolutely fine. So line those up, so there we go, and that just sits in place. So now we can do the screws up, do a couple of turns reverse to hear a click. There we go, so we do 1, 2, 3, and you'll be able to see this a bit better. So reverse turns. There we go, there's a click. So 1, 2, 3. And just do equal sides, just do a couple of turns, and gradually get it down to the hard stop. And there we go. There is our CPU cooling tower installed. So now we need to install the fan, which goes on the front and the bottom. A little bit fiddly for me to actually get to. And you should find that the fan just rests on the top of the screws, which we attached at the bottom there. And just pull the clips back. That holds it into place. Now we can flip it around and do the other side. You can check to see if the fan is pretty level or not. Actually, I'm going to scoot that across a little bit and just pull those into place, and that locks in. So there we go. There is our CPU cooler installed. I'll put some wires to the side, keep things nice and tidy so we can wire it up shortly. On this installation, the addressable RGB wires are going to go into a hub, which is attached to the case. So all we need to do is to plug in our PWM header for fan and CPU fan header 1, which is this one at the top. And that is it. That is pretty much done. Okay, so we are ready to start putting things into the case. So we're going to start off with the power supply. Now this is actually really cool from Montech. Pretty much everything you need is actually kind of labelled up in little baggies, which I'll try and get you some close-ups of anyway. So if you're not too sure what screws you need to use to attach things, don't worry, it's all written on the bags, which is absolutely brilliant. So let's spin the case around a little bit so you can see what's going on. Now the power supply section, the basement, doesn't have any cutouts or anything, so you have to put it in from the side. So let's spin that round onto the side. We'll move some of these cables out of the way. So we've got a little bit better access, and all we need to do is to take our power supply. You can mount it either way, fan up or fan down. The choice is yours in this one. It's ventilated either way, so make your own choice. I'm actually going to put it fan down in this instance, and just slot the power supply in from the side and kind of line it up, and then we can spin it all the way around, and I'll give you a close-up of attaching the screws. So with the power supply in, just make sure that those holes pretty much line up in the 4 places, and let's stick a screw in there to get it started. Don't do them all up completely tight straight away, because that way you'll still have a little bit of wiggle room in case you need to move it, or if any of the screws don't fully line up. When you've got the last screw in, you can torque it all down. And there we go, there's our power supply installed. So now we can install our I/O shield. Now, don't often see these days, they generally tend to be integrated. But something that a lot of people get wrong when they're actually installing these is this little bracket here, or the little bit of metal. So what you want to do is to bend that right back. If you leave it in the normal place, when you push the motherboard in, it's going to push that down and through, and it normally ends up going actually into your Ethernet port. And you can sometimes snip them out with wire cutters, but it's good practice just to bend it out of the way so it's not going to be a problem. Sometimes you have other ones which are in the way as well, but on this particular instance, that is the only one that needs actually moving. So to install this into your case, this is the orientation it should be. If you're not too sure, check on your motherboard. And all it needs is a little bit of firm pressure from the backside. So just line up into the recess. And there we go. Sometimes they click into position. There we go. Yeah, it wasn't quite all the way in. And if you don't get it all the way in, it is a little bit of a problem when you get your motherboard in to try and line it all up. But that's the I/O shield installed, so now we can put the motherboard in. Okay, so next we're going to put the motherboard into the case. Now this is probably inverted, so I will try and spin it around so you can see it. But essentially what we're going to do is to line up our rear I/O here with the I/O panel in the back of the motherboard. So grab your motherboard, you can grab it by the cooler if you wish to. Make sure there's no wires in the way. And just gently lower the whole platform into the case. And slowly line it up. Something in the way here. So there we go. If you're not too sure, there is actually a locating pin, which is the middle of the motherboard, just here. And there we go. That's located in there nicely. And if you're not too sure, you can check on the rear I/O panel just to make sure it is sat in there nicely. But that's great. That's holding it in place. So now we can go ahead and put our 9 screws in. So we've got 3 at the top, 3 in the middle, 3 at the bottom. I'll go ahead and do those because you don't really need to see that, and then we'll flip it around and start connecting up some of the front panel I/O and also the power supply. Okay, so now we're around to the back. So the wires for the RGB, which are coming out here, I've actually daisy chained them together, and we're only going to need 1 port actually on our RGB hub. So what we need to do is to pull off one of these plastic caps, and that reveals the 3 RGB pins, and then just match up the pins with the plug. Pretty straightforward, and there we go. So we can cable manage that a little bit later on. We will do a power on self test to make sure this all works before we do any real cable management. But that is the RGB connected to the hub. Very handy to have that included. And whilst we're in the back here, I'll pass through some of the cables. So we've got our 8-pin EPS for the CPU. So I'm just going to poke that through up there. We've also got our 24-pin main power connector, which is going to go through this top pass-through connector. So just feed that all the way through for now. And our GPU connector, I think we'll probably do that last, depending on how the routing is. A little bit of a cable nest going on here, but don't worry, we can soon fix all that. Okay, so we've got pretty much everything done. So cable in is done. I've done some B-roll of that, not all of it, but I've done a close-up of the connectors. Make sure when you put your connectors in, the top row is power switch LED positive, power LED negative, then you've got power switch, pins 3 and 4. Underneath that, at the bottom, first pin on your left-hand side, that is going to be hard drive LED positive diode, negative diode next to it, and next to that the next 2 pins are going to be for your reset switch. Those can be either way around, doesn't make a great deal of difference because it's just a momentary switch. But we are ready now to insert the graphics card. So graphics card is going to go here. I haven't put the cable through for power quite yet. I'm not entirely sure where it's going to come through. I was kind of hoping that the cutout in the bottom here would match up with where the graphics card is. Now if we had a bigger graphics card it would be absolutely fine, but it isn't, so we might have to take the power cable either through the bottom or through the side, but we'll see how it looks when it's actually installed. So I need to remove 2 of the blanking plates underneath the PCI Express slot, which is our top one here. So let's get our screwdriver and remove a couple of those. These are removable and replaceable. We're going to get our PCI Express graphics cards and just make sure that that is in the open position. Now we can grab our graphics card and line it up with the slot. And clicks into place, lovely. Put the 2 screws back in, and then we can look at the power cable. Now we've got our PCI Express graphics card power. I'll pass that through the bottom, just in here. I think that's going to line up pretty nicely, so to give a nice clean look. Push that in, make sure it clicks into place, and then we can cable manage this connector back in. There is a pigtail on this one. I will leave it out just in case at some point, if anybody wants to do an upgrade on this machine, if I sell it, the port is going to be pretty easy to access. So we can just cable manage that down, and yeah, I think that's going to look pretty clean when it's done. Okay, so there we have it. There is the finished build. Everything is all wired up, everything's connected up. Just going to need to put the back panel on and a little bit of minor cable management in the back. But overall, this case is great. Loads and loads of room to work in, even with this absolutely bonkers style cooler, which is absolutely huge. Fits in there no problem. There's a ton of gap between the outside, which you probably can't see from there, but we'll get you some B-roll. I'm going to fire this up now, make sure that everything works, and then I'll go ahead and do a Windows installation on it. Going to get some benchmarks, just some brief stuff, Cinebench and some Unigine Heaven, possibly 3D Mark, that sort of thing, just to see how it performs. And probably you've been seeing some B-roll already. Okay, so we're back and the job is done. And what do you think? I think it looks really, really nice. And considering the price we paid for this, I think it looks a little bit more expensive than you'd think. So we've gone through, it is in the region of about £600, give or take. The case is add a little bit more because in my original costings, I only put in for a £50 case. This is a £60 case. So there is a little bit there. And to be fair, I am using a cooler, which wasn't really part of the brief, but we could have used the stock one very easily. The temperatures in this thing are really good. So the 12400F doesn't get particularly hot anyway. I actually ran a long Cinebench loop of around about 10 minutes just to make sure that everything was okay. And we got somewhere in the region of about 12,000 points, which is yeah, pretty decent for this kind of money. Temperature wise, it actually did really well. So idle temperatures around about 30 degrees Celsius, and this is in a 25 degrees Celsius room, so about 5 degrees over ambient. It's a little bit warmer here in the UK currently, but potentially we could get it even less than that by upping the fans. I've actually put them down to very low speeds indeed at the moment. They don't need to be fast because it does a great job. The maximum temperature recorded generally is around about the 60s, so under a full all-core load, I think that is spectacular. It does a very good job. Half decent score, not too bad at all for the moderate cost of the processor, about £100. So I think it does very well indeed. When it comes to the GPU, we ran a Unigine Heaven loop, done that for a little while, and the GPU, similar sort of story, idle temperatures somewhere around the sort of low 30s, up towards the 40s. It has a zero fan technology, so that is purely being cooled by the air that the Montech 903 Air Max is pushing through. It does a great job. After the loop, we got to about 67 degrees Celsius, which is pretty much what you'd expect from an RX 6600. In terms of the score, just a shade under 6,000 points, which again is pretty much bang on where we should be. So we're getting the performance that we paid for, but we're not getting a huge amount of noise or a huge amount of heat, which is excellent. And the power supply itself is doing a fantastic job. Even though it was a more budget offering, seems to be doing absolutely fine. Obviously, 2-year warranty with it, so for £40, what more do you expect? It's done pretty well. And actually, I think it was reduced a little bit more. So it was around like £34 when I actually purchased it from Amazon.co.uk. And as I said earlier in the video, all of the stuff that we've got in here will be linked in the video description. Now, obviously, prices do change and fluctuate, so I strongly suggest you check them out. They are affiliated links, so we will get a small commission if you decide to make any purchases. Won't cost you anything extra, but certainly goes towards helping out the channel. So if you do want to use those links for buying any parts or actually anything on Amazon, eBay, or any of the other links that were provided, it really does help us out. So I think after doing the build in this and seeing what this case is like, as I said originally when I did the kind of partial review, this is a great case. It really is. For £60, it's hard to actually recommend anything else on the market at the moment. It's got great fans, great cooling, it looks nice in my opinion. Obviously that is somewhat subjective. Build quality is fantastic, it really is. Very strong, very rigid. I've got no complaints there whatsoever. Again, it looks great. I'm actually tempted to get the white version of this as well, because we are going to do a very similar build, around about £600, looking at AMD processors. So we'll see what we can get around about June, July 2024 for that sort of money. So this is the Intel one done and dusted, and I've got to say I'm very happy with it, and I will genuinely be actually quite sad to see it go. If I had the need for another computer here at Mike's Unboxing, then I would keep it, because yeah, it's great, and it's really nice and quiet, which I really do like. And it hasn't cost a fortune, which I also like, as you well know. Anyway, I'm wittering on now, so let's wrap this one up. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, smash that like button. If you want to see more content like this on a daily basis, maybe consider hitting subscribe and the chime notification. That way you'll be notified of future video releases. But for now, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.